What's up, guys? Today I'm going to show you how I made my new track, Hold On To You with Lux, out now on Nicky Romero's Protocol Recordings. Here we go. Alright, so let's get right into it. We will start with the drop first, because I know that's what people love the most, people care about the most. I'm not going to talk about the vocal for this, because the vocal production and mixing was done in a separate project, and it's kind of a separate thing. So for this, it's going to focus only on the production. I'm also not going to play back the entire song at once, because I don't want to run into any copyright issues with my channel. So I'm going to first just kind of break down each element. Alright, so let's talk about the drop leads. They sound like this. There really isn't too many layers here. All these other ones here are actually muted. These are other things that I was trying out and was just going to see if I liked, but ended up settling on these two layers, which are this one and then this one. The second one is more like a super saw layer to add a lot of energy, and it's a Nexus layer, and I actually added a bunch of release to kind of make it more drawn out, and it's also lower than this other layer, which is a serum lead layer. So both these layers are routed to this bus here. I've got standard clip. That's just removing some of the peaks. Maserati, a really cool plugin if you want to just add like a lot of extra energy to your sounds. I think it's actually a guitar plugin. Talked about it in other videos, but it's a really cool plugin to add extra energy. Some EQ rolling off the low end, a standard clipper again to cut off those peaks. This is something that I've been trying to implement a lot more on my productions. I've learned actually from other mixing and tutorial videos, is putting clippers in to cut off those transient peaks to give yourself more headroom to be able to push everything up a little bit more. You can add this to a certain extent where you're not even going to notice it cutting those peaks. So you can tell when I turn that off and turn it on, you can't actually even really hear those transient peaks being cut off, but it's actually leaving more headroom for everything else. Got a little bit of reverb here. Just an insert, not a send. 3.7 seconds of decay, 25%. And then I have a fruity filter, an EQ, an endless smile. This is for just automating into different parts of the track. And then for kickstart, sidechain, only 50%. I didn't think this track needed like a lot of like really heavy pumping, old progressive house kind of feeling. I've been doing this a lot with tracks, is only using a lighter sidechain, which 50% I think was really good for this track. Then the other thing I got going on here is a transient layer. And that's just like a little ting sound. And I don't think that's even sidechained at all. Okay, it is sidechained, 50% again. And that's just, again, to add extra feel to the leads, add an extra little bit of a punch. Adding a transient lead layer on top of your sounds is going to add a ton to it. Now for the drop chords, we got this. This is just one silent one layer. Here you see I tried adding in some extra stuff, and I actually ended up muting it. This is a really good practice, is to, when you try different things, maybe with your melody, is to leave it in there still, but then just mute it. And maybe you'll come back to it later, but it's still there in case you want to go back to it. So that sounds like this again. So I'm by no means a music theory guy. I've kind of just feel it out. Pretty simple chords, but a few things that I've learned with chords is to have one consistent note. Really adds a lot of continuity to the chord progression and is easier for the listener to listen to. The other thing is to have these notes here where it's actually leading into the next chord. You can see I pushed this C up to D right here to lead into this A sharp major chord right here. And then I added little things like this right here where it jumps from A to A sharp to A. So just these little tiny changes in your chord progressions here and here will add a lot more flavor to your tracks. So that is it for those drop chords. I also have this going. And that is just two separate layers here. So like a pad layer, This is probably from Splice. And then a vocal like gate. And that's from Nexus. And then together on these, not much. Just a really heavy EQ. Basically, I would play the entire drop on loop, and I would just keep EQing this to a point where I'm cutting out, where it's not battling with anything else, mostly the other drop chords and the leads, but it's still creating some type of presence. Pushing it a little bit wider with the imager. And then again, just for automations. For the bass, for the sub, we got this. A very melodic techno kind of sub bass. So I think this part is really important to know for producers nowadays, is to try to merge genres of things that may be trendy or things that are working right now with things that you truly like. I love progressive house, old style progressive house, third party, a lot of Nicky Romero progressive house tracks. But it's hard to break into the scene right now with that older style progressive house. So one thing you can do is kind of merge styles. I think I have a little bit of that older style progressive house with the leads, with the chords. But for the bass line, I had this melodic techno bass. So this adds a little bit of a fresher approach to an older sound. For that, it's just one serum layer. And I have this. Just cutting out all the high end. A lot of times I cut my sub up to 125, depending on where that first harmonic is, just depending on a lot of different things. But for this one, I didn't do that. I cut only the high frequencies because it sounded good. So at the end of the day, you should really just do what sounds good. The Pultec EQ, this adds a little bit of beef to it. Really cool plugin, an analog emulation of the Pultec EQ. And then kickstart. For this one, you do want to do this at 100% so that it doesn't interfere with the kick. Now we got a mid bass layer here. This is just one serum layer. Again, I'm guessing this is from Splice. Splice actually has a lot of good presets that people don't realize sometimes. I'm typically the guy who starts with a preset, and then I understand serum enough where I can tweak everything to my liking, especially with the filter, the ADSR. I can go into each oscillator and edit the table. But I'll typically start with the preset and then edit it from there. And then for this sound, I made it a little bit more mono so that it doesn't interfere with any of the wider elements of the track. Saturn, this is without Saturn. This is with Saturn. So it really changes the sound completely. I think I probably just played around with these presets and figured out one that adds a different character to the sound. EQ, cutting out the low end, leave room for the sub, and then again, cutting out those high frequencies for the drums and for the leads. And then again, a heavy sidechain. And then the other kind of melodic components going on are this. Again, kind of like a stutter house type thing, putting it into progressive house. It adds some nice atmosphere in the background. We got this. And then just some down filters. A really good thing to do when you make a track is to export all of the stem groups, keep them in your browser here in FL Studio, and then use them in different tracks. It'll increase your workflow so much. That way when you're working on a track, you're like, oh, I need down filters. I need sweeps. Let me look on Splice. Oh, next one. No, I can go into my old tracks and I can pull this in. I use this in my song Free, and it fit really well. So definitely don't reinvent the wheel. Look back at your old tracks and see what you use in your old tracks. Then the last thing here are the drums. We got this kick drum. We got a clap coming in here. A hat. Some more drums. Again, I think I used these drums in Free, so I was able to pull the drums in from Free and increase my workflow and then focus on other things. And then some fills. And that is it for the drop. So I want to talk about this second breakdown first, because there's something really important, I think, here. And that is to keep the drums going into the second breakdown. In a lot of older style progressive house tracks, again, I feel like there'd be like a down sweep here at the end of the drop and go back into that same first breakdown, more emotional with the chords. But with house music in general being a lot more popular right now, I I sprinkled in that type of approach where I keep the drums and I keep the beat going. So by doing that, I kept the kick drum going, I kept the sub going, I kept the mid bass going, and it just continues that energy into the second breakdown. So I got these piano chords that come in. And we got two layers here. We got a Contact piano and we got an Atmos piano. Atmos is a free plugin. Contact is not free, but it is by far, in my opinion, the best string, guitar, and piano plugin. Those are routed to a bus where I've got a little bit of EQ rolling off the high end. One of my favorite Pultec presets for pianos. Some EQing. OTT, give it a little bit more compression, a little bit more, just squeezing it a little bit more. Didn't do anything here. And then I still have these vocal pads that come right into they go from the drop right into the second breakdown. I got this really cool little bass sound. I used Nexus for that. And I did some crazy EQing on this one. Two things, little tips on this one. A lot of people say you should only ever cut with EQ. You should never boost. Typically that's true, but boosting can actually create really cool things. By boosting the crap out of 2400 hertz, it actually adds some different flavor to this sound and really creates more energy, where this is without it. And then this is with it. I thought it made it a little bit more crispy, and yeah, I like the way it sounded. And then this is just a reverse of that sound. A little ambience here. Some more drums that come in. And then some strings that come in. I'll talk about that later though. Alright, so let's talk about the beginning of the track now. So it starts out with these strings that get faded in, don't come in till here. And the strings are not playing properly. I have this issue with Contact where, like, whenever I reopen a project, I have to reselect the Contact preset. Don't know what's going on here, but it is the Contact session strings. And then again, another way to add more flavor to your chord progressions. This chord progression the second time around, it adds these notes here, which just adds a little bit more variety to the chord progression in the track. And then there's really nothing on that, just some automations. This is what the piano chord progression in the full breakdown looks like. Same thing again, adding different notes, adding inversions, moving the middle note in the chord, up one in the scale or down one in the scale, adding a seventh, adding a ninth, adding an 11th, changing the bass progression. All these little things will really improve your chord progressions. Little ARP loop that comes in. Another ARP, which is the same melody as that. That's not playing. Don't know why it's not playing, but it's just another layer. Some pads that come in, and that is the same pad as in the drop. Another pad there. Again, a serum sound. A little kick drum that comes in after 8 bars. Again, kind of on the same concept where I said that I had the drums go into the second breakdown. I also am doing this in the beginning of the track where, again, with like old progressive house songs, you wouldn't hear many, drums like that going on that early in the track. But it just keeps that vibe going and adds a little bit of a house element to it. Some more drums come in right here. Got a respace that comes in right here. A respace is a great way to tell the listener that something's coming. When you've got 16 bars of just instrumental, a little bit of drums, and then that res and that sub comes in, it's like, okay, something's coming. This is a really good way to cue the listener that something's coming. Some just atmospheres. Got another pluck atmosphere right here. So for this pluck atmosphere, it is a serum sound, but I added this plugin called The Vibe, Really cool. It adds like this really cool atmosphere sound to it. I add a little bit of ducking so that it isn't as wet, and then I have it at 48%. So this is without that. And then this is with it. You can hear that little atmosphere sparkle sound come in. Cutting out the low end, and then I have to add this soothe a lot of times after I use the vibe because it creates some harsh resonances. Then I just got some risers, downers, sweeps, and stuff. This kind of stuff is great to include in your track every 8 bars or so, but I think one important thing is to not get carried away with it. I think that's one thing that I used to do a lot, and a lot of other beginner producers struggle with, is adding way too many of these sweeps and having them way too loud. These should really be very much in the background of your mix and shouldn't be a focal point or shouldn't be super present. So I would try to just keep lowering this stuff until you can barely hear it. And then for the build, I just have this snare build. As you can see, rabbit hole. I use it in the track Rabbit Hole. And then I also have the leads starting to come in. So the leads sound like this. So I'm basically just looping the first bar of that drop melody, and I am filtering it in. I am cutting out some of the low frequencies and automating it, and this just helps tease the listener of what's coming. And then on my master, I do this on almost every track. Endless Smile on my master. I haven't been doing this as much just because it really washes out the track, especially if you have a vocal that goes into the drop. It washes out the vocal. What I would suggest is to use Endless Smile on individual elements and not on your master chain. I've got this FabFilter automation, and all that's doing is it's lowering some of the high frequencies, like 3 dB, as the build comes in. And then I have this stereo separation that makes it a little bit more mono as it comes in. All these things just kind of shrink the track down and lower the energy, and then when the drop hits, the energy goes right back up right here. And it adds, it makes that listener feel like the drop's hitting. All right, so let's talk a little bit about the second breakdown, second build, what's different than the first one. I've got some different risers, downers, sweeps, and stuff than the first break. I've got this sound that comes in. I've got this sound that comes in. Love this sound. I found this just messing around with sounds, and it is a Avenger preset. This is a really old plugin, still use it sometimes. And then just again adding some additive EQ right there, rolling off the low end. The respace comes back in, the shaker comes back in, the ARP sound comes back in, chord progression comes back in. I went all out on this chord progression, as you can see. This is kind of a fun thing, is to just keep adding like 7th, 9th, and 11ths in the build into the second drop. It just makes it feel like that tension is rising and rising and rising. As you can see, I did that here. I also have a guitar that comes in. You can't really even hear it in the final version of the song. The guitar is Contact. Let's see if it'll work. As you can see, it didn't. This is a problem that I have where whenever I open up Contact, it just like goes back to the main menu, and that's why I have to bounce all my Contact stuff as audio. Then all I have on that is actually a piano plugin. I like to use this on my pianos, this Greg Wells Piano Centric by Waves. I guess I just thought I'd add a little bit to the guitar. You should really experiment with adding plugins that maybe don't belong on a sound, and adding it to a sound and just seeing what it does. This is without it. And this is with it. Adds a little bit extra crispiness. Then I also had this moment here where this little tiny, everything drops out and this 2 chord progression comes in. And then the build comes back in. So it's building and then it like cuts out and that little piano chord progression comes back in, and then the build continues from where it was. And those are the big differences here in the second breakdown. The only really big difference is this second lead layer that comes in. And for that, I have a Silent 1 layer, Matisse and Sadko, and that is routed here, which is the same bus for the other leads. And that is pretty much the only difference between the first drop and the second drop, was that second lead layer. So that is how I made Hold On To You out now on Protocol Recordings. Go stream it, go listen to it, watch this video, subscribe. I'm going to do more of these in the future. So I hope this was helpful. If anyone has any comments or questions, drop a comment below.